Hi, this is Tamara at mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating some of the pieces you need to make your own bear squish, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description or go to your favorite search engine and simply type in Moogly Bear Squish, and this free pattern should pop right up. You can make your bear a polar bear or a teddy bear. It just depends on the color of yarn you use. And for this project, we're using Bernat blanket, the 6 super bulky weight, and we're using 3 colors, vintage white, birch, and coal. As I say, those are the colors you see in my finished bear, but you can use whichever colors you want, and if you choose a couple shades of brown, you'll have a beautiful teddy bear as well. We're also using a USL 8mm crochet hook, and I've stuffed mine with a 10-inch microbead pillow ball, but you can use Fiberfill if you prefer. I also used 2 safety eyes, 24mm, and 1 safety nose, 19mm. If you'd like, you can embroider on or sew on your own nose and eyes, which may be more appropriate if you want to give this to a child under the age of 3. As you can see, this is a great big guy. As I say, he's about 10 inches across, excluding his feet, arms, and ears. So let's go ahead and get started making our own bear squish. Most of the pieces of the bear squish are made by working in a spiral, and you can see that a little bit here at the top where you see where we start, and we just keep working out from there. This means we're not going to join at the end of the round or chain 1 at the beginning of the round, except for that very first stitch. So when you're working in a spiral, it's super important to keep a stitch marker in the first stitch of every round so that you can count your rounds as you go and you don't get lost in the pattern. I cannot stress enough how important it is to keep that stitch marker in there as you work. Beyond that, though, the body and the belly down here, you can see it's that same spiral. They repeat. The belly is the first few rounds of the body, and it's just half double crochets, all worked around and around in a spiral. So you'll want to follow the written instructions, or you can check out the other squish videos like the ladybug squish, which has a little bit more of working in that spiral. But really, it's just half double crochets worked around and around, so there isn't much to show there. What is different on our bear that isn't just these rounds of half double crochet are the ears, the arms, and the legs. And the really fun thing about this pattern is the ears, the arms, and the legs are all the exact same. So you end up making 6 of these pieces. Now, when you make the ears, you want to leave a long tail on each one because we'll use that long tail to sew them on to the top of our body here. When we make the arms and the legs, we don't need the long tail. That's the only difference. You can see he really wants to just sit up right here in front of me. The only other piece we make is this snout right here, which is also a really simple spiral and the same as we start up here. So let's go ahead and make our extra pieces for our bear squish. You can use white Bernat blanket to make a polar bear or brown Bernat blanket to make a teddy bear, but I'm going to be demonstrating today in this bright yellow because these stitches are a little bit easier to see. And of course, you can make any color bear you like. So first, let's demonstrate how to make the ears, arms, and legs. As I say, they're all the same. So we start by making a magic circle. So to make the magic circle, I am going to go over the forefinger of my non-hook hand towards me twice. What does that look like? Once, twice, just like that. Then I'm going to take my hook and insert it under both of those loops. I'm going to grab the loop that's furthest back with my hook here and pull just the edge of it underneath. You can see how I've secured those other strands with my hand. Then I'll yarn over and pull a loop through. And now I can start crocheting. When I crochet into this circle, I want to make sure I go into the loop itself and that I trap this tail end in each one of these stitches. This is what allows me to pull down and close up that magic circle. So to begin, I'm going to start by chaining 1, and then I will work a single crochet into the ring. So I'm going to remove my finger very carefully here, go into the ring and under that tail end, yarn over, pull up my loop, and finish my single crochet. So now, since this is the first stitch of the round, I do want to grab a stitch marker. So this is a crochet stitch marker, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the top of that very first stitch so I always know where my round begins. Anytime you're working in a spiral, it becomes really easy to lose track of that first stitch, and that's where we want to have our stitch marker to help us out. After that first single crochet is into the ring, we then work 6 more half double crochets into the ring. So we yarn over, go into that ring, again, make sure we trap that tail and finish our half double crochet. So there's our first one. I'm going to add 5 more and I'll see you as soon as those are done. Okay, so now I have a total of 7 stitches worked into the ring, and you can see I had that tail enclosed in all of them. So now what we should be able to do is pull on that tail to close up this circle. While I do that, I tend to like to put my fingers over the circle itself to kind of help stabilize it and pull back against it. But you can see it just slid right out. There we go. Sometimes it likes to stick a little bit. If you find that yours doesn't quite close as much as you'd like it to without worrying about breaking the yarn, then when you go to weave in this end, you can just weave it in back and forth and really pull that in closed the rest of the way. But for now, it looks pretty good. So this is what it looks like at the end of round 1. You'll notice I have not joined. Again, we're working in a spiral. So I'm not going to slip stitch join. We're just going to mark that as the first stitch of our round and say now round 1 is finished. So for round 2, we work 2 half double crochets in each stitch around. So we just start off by working straight into that first marked stitch, right into our first stitch. So we can go ahead and move our stitch marker out of the way for a moment. Put our first half double crochet in there. And now this is the new first stitch of our round. So I'm going to put my stitch marker right back in that stitch. There we go. Now we need to put a second stitch in that stitch. There's 2 in that stitch, and then we continue to put 2 half double crochets in each stitch around. So there's 1, go right back in that same stitch for 2, and we'll continue all the way around. So now I have worked 2 half double crochets in each stitch around, and I know I'm in the right spot when I work into that last stitch right before our marked stitch. So we can count out from that marked stitch and see we have 14, and we're finished with round 2. For round 3, we're going to work a little differently. We kind of have to break it into parts here. We're going to start with a half double crochet in the next stitch. So this goes right in our first one. Let's move our stitch marker out of the way, finish our half double crochet, and put our stitch marker right in the top of that stitch. There we go. I cannot stress enough how important those are. I too have had the hubris to think I could get away without using a stitch marker while working in the spiral. I learned my lesson quite quickly. So for round 3, we have our half double crochet in the first stitch, then we're going to single crochet in the next 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we half double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochets. You'll notice it's really starting to cup up now, and that's good. We don't want this to be a flat circle. Then we single crochet in the next 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Finally, we half double crochet in the last stitch, and we should have 1 stitch left, which is exactly what we've got. So we know our stitch markers in that next stitch, we're in the right spot. So now is when you want to take a moment to weave in your first end right here. So you can see I'm just going to flip it completely wrong side out, give that end another tug, and then I would go ahead, grab my yarn needle, and weave back and forth. Let me grab one here real quick. Here we go. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have a yarn needle with a hole big enough for a super bulky yarn like this one. I'm just going to go ahead and thread it on here. So when you weave in your end on a magic circle, it's really important, even if you've gotten it just as tight as you'd like it to be, like this one is, to go in both directions. So you can kind of see that the yarn is coming out from this direction from the yarn. So it's fine to take a couple stitches this way, we'll say. And you can even go all the way around if you want to. Especially if you need to tighten it up, you'd probably want to go all the way around your circle with your needle. But then, when you feel like you've gone that one way enough, head back the other direction. Skip over a stitch there, otherwise you'll just undo your stitches. We don't want to do that. But make sure you go both directions around that circle. That is really going to help that magic circle stay closed. When you hear people complain about their magic ring opened back up over time, It's because they didn't change directions. Now, I've gone back and forth in both directions, and I would still continue to weave this in just a little bit beyond that because, of course, you just don't want your stitches to come out. Now, the nice thing is we don't have to weave in the whole thing. We don't even have to trim this off because this is all going to get sealed up inside. So it doesn't have to be pretty. You know, if you're a novice to weaving in your ends, you feel like, gosh, that's a little messy. It's not going to show. Just want to make sure it doesn't show here on the outside. So you can go ahead and just leave that right in there when you're done weaving it in. Okay, so when that's all done, then we're ready for row 4 of our ears, arms, and legs. We were working in the rounds, now we're going to switch over to working in a row. So to do that, we're going to be folding our piece flat like this and working through both layers. So this is where things deviate a little bit. We're going to start with a chain 1. It's actually, we don't so much need the chain 1 for height here, but it actually makes it really a lot easier to get through this next maneuver. What we want to do is go through the front of this stitch here, our marked stitch. We can get that stitch marker out of the way. And then we want to go through from behind here, straight through, if you will, that last stitch we just made. So having that chain 1 there gives you just a little bit of room to maneuver the hook right through there. You go through both layers, pull up your loop, and single crochet, like so. So then you're going to continue to do that all the way across. We just want to match up those stitches across. So we go to the next stitch and that next stitch right behind it and make a single crochet. Same thing all the way across. Now we had 14 stitches in the previous round. So working through both of these layers, we should have a total of 7 single crochets. And so as we approach the last pair here, you might find it feels a little funny because these, of course, were 2 stitches that were right next to each other. But if you just put your hook in there and kind of push on through, it should slide right between, or underneath, I should say, the tops of both of those 2 stitches. So now we should have 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we've closed up our little paw or ear, whatever it's destined to be. So finally, we just have one more row. We are going to chain 1 and single crochet all the way across. We just want to add a little height or length to our arms, legs, ears, whatever they may end up being. And I needed just a little bit more yarn here out of my skein. I had almost pulled out just the right amount. So now we'll finish that up. We've got just a single crochet and each single crochet across. Couldn't be simpler. Easy peasy. And now you just need to remember to leave a long tail on 2 of these because you'll want to sew them on for ears. And then, of course, you can just cut a 4 or 5 inch tail on the other 2 that get sort of crocheted right on into the body. So after you cut that off, you can go ahead and just pull that tail end through that final loop if you like to secure. And now it's ready to attach. So let's take a look at what these look like on the body itself. Okay, so before you stuff your body, after you've made your pieces, you will sew your ears onto the top, the body portion, which has the majority of the body itself. So what you want to do is just kind of count out from the center here. You can use the tail end when you finish up. I like to use the tail end of the body that will be hanging out here to help line it up. Come out here and then count out evenly on either side. You can see it's about 3 rounds, 1, 2, 3 or so out from the center. And then you can see I just curved it slightly and then use that long tail to just sew it right on. Again, you'll do this before you stuff and finish your bear. It's so much easier to do this. You don't want to seal it all up and then try and add pieces on. You want to sew these on before you stuff it and sew the final pieces together. So you can just add a little bit of a curve there, and that stands up really beautifully. I kind of tilt it. After you make one of these pieces, you'll see there's kind of a natural tilt to it a little bit. So I used that to my advantage. And you can see here, the piece we just made and just curved it a little bit like that as I sewed it right on. That was easy peasy. Now, for the arms and legs, as we're crocheting around making our pieces, you can see if I look really closely, right there is the seam where we sewed the body to the belly as our final step. But as you're making the belly and as you're making the body, and this is why we make our arms, legs, and ears first, then as you're crocheting, when you get to this point, you'll just sort of pin those together and crochet through both layers, and then those will be attached as well. So you don't have to sew on the arms or legs. You have to make them ahead of time, but you'll actually just crochet right through them as you continue to make those body and belly stitches. And if you followed the other squish tutorials or made any of the other squishes, you've seen me do that, especially on the belly portion of a lot of the other animals. A lot of those have legs attached as you're crocheting the belly. But again, those crochet stitches are all just half double crochets worked in a spiral. So the only other piece, we've got, of course, our safety eyes and our safety nose right here, but we've got our snout. So let's go ahead and make the snout or face of our bear squish now. So now let's go ahead and make the snout, which actually is only 3 rounds long, and those first 2 rounds are the exact same as the first 2 rounds of the belly or the body. So if you're struggling to get started on those, they begin just like this. We're going to start again with our magic circle. So I go over my finger twice towards me, get in there with my hook, make sure those ends are secured here so I can pull that loop forward. There we go. Yarn over and pull that loop through. Then I chain 1, and I'll go ahead and take my finger out now. You can, use your hands however makes it feel the most comfortable for you. Then I'm going to single crochet. Again, I want to make sure I catch that tail right into the ring. And again, I want to put a stitch marker right in the top of that very first stitch. There we go. Then I am going to put 9 half double crochets in the ring. So that will be a total of 10 stitches. And again, this is the exact same way we start our body and our belly. So we just keep putting half double crochet stitches right into that ring. And again, make sure that you catch that tail every time. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. You can sew it closed, but the magic ring doesn't happen. It doesn't have its magic if you don't work over that tail. So I'm just continuing to put half double crochets in here. My pulled out yarn is trying to join the party a little too soon. So let's see. I can't yap and count at the same time. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I need 2 more stitches. We need a total of 10. So 1 and 2. There we go. Now, again, I can go ahead and pull on that tail end to close up our ring. I'll pull up that working loop a little extra here. Secure that and pull on our tail. There we go, and it closes up nice and tight. I'll put my hook right back in my loop here. I want to make sure anytime I take my hook out of my working loop that when I pull back on the working yarn, the part of the loop that moves back down in my crochet is in front of my hook. That's going to help keep your loop from getting twisted as you work or take your hook in and out. And it can cause a lot of sort of just funky looking stitches and strange twists if you have it the wrong way around. So it's a good tip to always make sure you put your hook back in the right way. For round 2, all we're going to do is work 2 half double crochets in each stitch around for a total of 20 stitches. So again, we're working in a spiral, so we haven't joined here. We just yarn over and go right on into that very first stitch. So we put our half double crochet in there. We can mark the top of that stitch. There we go. And then put, of course, a second half double crochet right in that same stitch. We do want to stay flat for this one. So if you find that this is starting to cup severely, make sure that you pull up on that last loop a little bit, that you don't pull back on your working yarn and make that working active loop super tight as you make your stitches. If you do that, it will cause your stitches to pull in and start cupping even when you don't want them to. So again, 2 half double crochets in each stitch around. We had 10 stitches in our first round, so we'll have 20 stitches at the end of round 2. So this is what it should look like after round 2 of the body, the belly, and the snout. But right now we're making the snout. So round 3 of the snout is just like the final round of both the body and the belly. So for round 3, we single crochet in that first stitch. I'm going to move that stitch marker out of the way. And of course, as soon as I make that single crochet, I will go ahead and mark that again. It's actually a little optional right now, but I like to have it just to help me visually put things together. Then I'm going to slip stitch in the next stitch. And then I can go ahead and break the yarn. And I'm going to leave a long tail for sewing, and I'm going to seamless join it. What we've been doing here, you can see we've been working in our spiral. These last couple stitches have been stepping down. You saw that jog we had before. we want to step down and come back down to the level of our crochet here and sort of round out our circle. So to do that, we want to leave a long tail for sewing. So we're going to sew this snout onto our body. So I'm going to go around it 3 times. This is my little trick just to make sure that my long tail is long enough. It's not overly scientific other than in my experience, it seems to work. So that's what I like to do. There we go. So with that length, now what I can do is go ahead and just pull up on that yarn. I'm not going to yarn over and pull that tail end through. That would create a little knot, which is going to show right on the face, and we don't want that. We want a nice, smooth look on the face of our bear. So I'm going to pull that yarn needle back out on our long end here, get that on our needle. Always a little bit of a challenge with the super bulkies, but I find if I just pinch it really tightly, I can get it right on there. So now what we're going to do, you can see right there is the stitch. Let me get those out of the way. Right there's the stitch we have our slip stitch worked into. So I'm going to go right to the next stitch with my yarn needle and go under those top 2 loops the same way I would if I were using a hook. And just pull right through under both of those 2 loops. Oh, got a little wound up there. Let's see. Did we do it? Okay, there we go. We didn't catch anything else. There we go. Now you can see I'm pulling quite gently. I want this to sort of look like it's another stitch. It's going out of here under those 2 loops. This is where that yarn is coming from. So I want to send the needle right back down in that same spot. Make sure we don't catch any other yarns here. Any other strands. There we go. So now if I give this just a little bit of sort of a tug here and even out those loops, you can see it just creates a really nice smooth line. So you can go ahead and take the stitch marker out. For the snout, it's not as important. For the body and the belly, I like to use that marked stitch to kind of match them together and be able to tell front from back. With the snout, of course, we don't need that. So you can see now we have a really nice circle, and we've got this long tail that we can later use to sew it onto the body. But before you do that, of course, you'll want to take a moment to weave in this first end back here. Go ahead and weave it in. You don't have to cut it off very close. Again, it's going to be sewn on. But now is when you want to go ahead and apply your safety nose. So let me grab my safety noses and show you how I did that. Now, before we add the safety nose, let's embroider on our smile. So the way I like to do it is just sort of start in between these 2 rows right here. I'll just pick a place where I want the top of my face to be. And you want to try and get not so much between the stitches, that can have a lot of movement, but I try and kind of go right into a stitch above it. That's going to hold it a little bit more secure and have a little bit less wiggle room. Remember, our giant big hook fit right through here, and we want it to be secure. So pick a place that's a little bit smaller will be helpful. You can see I've just got a length of the black coal, a colored, officially, Bernat blanket, and I've just cut a length of it off the skein here, probably far too much, as you can see. Don't pull it all the way through. Leave yourself some backing here. And then I'm just going to go kind of straight down, say right about here. And a lot of times when I'm making a face for a stuffed animal like this, I will pull it out and redo it several times. So if you do one and you say, gosh, this doesn't quite look right, I want to redo it, do that. Go ahead before you've, tied in any of your ends, woven in your ends, take a look at it and say, I like it, I don't like it. It's okay to come back and change it. Like looking at this right now, I think this came down a little too far. So I'm just going to go right back out. And let's end that a little bit higher up. Let's not go down quite so far. Let's split this first round. I think this looks like, oh, it's all loose right there. Let's find a place where it will stay. There, that feels good. You kind of have to just use your sense of touch sometimes and work with what the stitches are giving you in the moment. So now we've got our center line. And if we look at our bear, it kind of comes out like this on either side. So we can kind of use our stitches to help guide us. I'm going to start coming up here on the left, I think. Find a spot where the needle feels like it's going to stay put. There we go. The nice thing about Bernat blanket is because of its construction, you can't really split. I caught my tail there. Doesn't really matter, but we'll make that nice and tight. You can't really split the yarn itself. So it is nice. You can go ahead and use a sharper yarn needle if you want to really get into some of these tight places. So now I'll just come right back to that same spot. There we are. And then let's make sure that our bear is smiling and not serious. If you wanted to make a serious bear, You could do that. You can make a sad bear. Care Bears had the grouchy bear or cloudy bear. Sadness bear? It's been too long. There we go. So we come back out and go back down in that same spot it came out of before. And this is how I do it. Now, there's lots of different techniques, I'm sure, but whatever makes you happy and gives you the face you like for your bear. I'm actually liking the way this one's coming out, I think better than my original. Again, just wants to catch some of those strands back there. Make sure you don't get too much caught up back there. There we go. You go back to that same spot and just sort of make it look the same. Kind of aim for that same spot here on this side. That feels a little loose. Let's come over here. Oh, that's even looser. Just want to find a good spot to stick our needle. There we go. Found it. Just have to have a little bit of patience. So now I'll pull that through and come back and meet that line. There we go. So you can see it's a little lopsided. I might redo that second half if I were, if this was going on a finished bear. But for right now, I'm pretty pleased with that. So you can go ahead and weave in those black ends, of course, on back here. You don't have to weave them too much. Just get them nice and secured down. And then you can add your safety nose. So I used a 19mm safety nose. Of course, you can change the size and style or just embroider on the nose if that's what you prefer. But then I like to put that safety nose kind of right at the top there. And that way it just kind of covers the top of that line. And I think it gives it a little bit more accurate look if you do it that way. We put it right in at the top there. There we go. So I like to embroider on the lines before I put on the safety nose because when I tried one where I added the safety nose first and I couldn't get back under there with my black line to really have those meet up well. So I do recommend you take the time to sew those lines on before you add your safety nose. So then once you've got those lines on, like I say, you put your safety nose right through there. If you haven't used safety nose or safety eyes before, you can see it's sort of a plastic piece here with this long shaft that you stick right through your crochet. Make sure this part's on the right side. And then on the wrong side, they come with these backs like this, and you put them down on the shaft. You push really hard. You'll hear a couple, and if you don't hear it, you'll feel it, a couple of sharp snaps, and that will hold that on there nice and permanent. So now these are not officially rated for children under 3. I don't really generally see them going anywhere. But again, if you're giving this to a child under 3, it is recommended that you embroider it on with contrasting yarn rather than using safety eyes or safety noses. Okay, so when you've made all your pieces, but you haven't sewn them together yet, you will have the top of the body with arms sticking out. You will have the belly with legs sticking out. You'll have 2 ears and a snout. So then it's time for the assembly. We already talked about adding the ears to the body. So that is the first step. Second step is to add the safety eyes to the body. Now, I put the face down here pretty low. I think in retrospect, I might have put it up 1 row higher. Play with it. Play with the placement of your face. If you like it like this, put it the same way. Put it up a little higher. Changing things like the placement of the eyes and the face will really change the look of your bear significantly. And you can have a lot of fun with that. Different eye styles, spread them apart. Just have a lot of fun. Don't be afraid to play with your bear squish and give it its own look. So we put the safety eyes. You want to, if you're going to put the snout in between them like I do, make sure you put them far enough apart for that. So you can kind of take your snout, where'd mine go here, and sort of hold it up and say, okay, I'm going to need it to be this far apart before you snap those in. Then, so you put on your safety eyes right there, or again, embroider them on if that's what you want to do. Make sure that they are on this side of your ears. Your tail end should be back here. Because again, we haven't sewn our big 2 pieces together yet. Add your eyes. Then add your snout right there. And go ahead and put it together. You're going to sew it right between the eyes, and it's going to be right above the line. If you put it in the same place, it's going to be right above the line of sewing right here. So your top piece is going to end right about here. So you just use the long tail of the snout to go around. It'll all be open, so you'll have access to the inside of the body, and you can just sew that right on and weave the end in on the inside. Once all the eyes, the snout, the ears, everything's attached, you'll just have 2 pieces left. The body with all of its pieces, and then the belly with these 2 legs. And you're going to have 1 long tail to sew them together with. So what I like to do is insert the ball or the stuffing inside the body up here, and then take your stitch markers and match up stitch by stitch the belly piece to the body piece. Again, you can see if you look really closely, that is the line of whip stitching right there. So you can just use your stitch markers. It will look a little crazy. I'm going to warn you about this right now. I've gotten so many questions over the years. All the squishes are like this. It doesn't look like the body and the belly are going to match up. The belly is going to look significantly smaller. However, if you follow the written instructions, you'll have the same number of stitches in the last round of the belly that you have in the last round of the body. So they should match up 1 to 1. The trick is just making sure that you face those feet forward, make sure the feet are facing the eyes, and then just go around and take your stitch markers. I like to mark about every 5 stitches all the way around with a stitch marker. So I'll count out 5 stitches on one piece, 5 stitches on the next piece, put them together with a stitch marker. The next 5, put them together. Then I can take my long tail end and just start whip stitching the 2 pieces together all the way around. So when you get all the way around, you should just have that one end. Everything else should be on the inside of the ball. So you can just carefully finish off that last whip stitch and then try and weave in your end here on the back of the bear. Pull it taut, tie it, and that tail should go right back in. And that's how to make a bear squish, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.